Today we are joined by Max Wright, aka Contrarian Dude of Success Council, and we'll be discussing alternative economics and crypto to be free in the current system and the coming Great Reset. I guess updates from our side, we're looking at the membership being completed here on Cryptonomist Consulting. So that's what we're working on, and we'll continue to do so. And when that's live, we'll let you guys know. So how are you, Max? And thanks for coming on.
I'm doing really, really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. Obviously, your work's quite, in this space, it's quite well known in a sense. I've known your work for the last couple of years with the Success Council, and also your work on YouTube, where you give your sort of trading analysis and your views on the crypto market currently, which is great. So I know that your stuff is really good work.
Thank you. Appreciate the compliment.
Excellent. So I guess let's start with, your story and how you got into crypto and also, alternative economics, because I know it's not just really crypto you only focus on, although that's a lot of what you're focusing on at the moment, but just how you got into maybe alternative economics and crypto itself.
Okay, well, that one goes back a long way. So I don't know why. It's a weird quirk of personality. But for whatever reason, I was very interested in economics. One of my favorite classes in high school was economics. And I remember asking my teachers, especially the subject of money, just because I was interested in it. And I remember asking my high school teachers this simple question: if everyone emptied their pockets and all the bank accounts and you counted up all the money — I didn't know to use the word money supply at the time. I could have asked the question much quicker. But I said, if their pockets, if you're the bank account, you count up all the money in 1900 and you count up all the money now, there's way more money now. How does money get into the system? What makes the money supply bigger without using the word money supply? And the high school economics teacher didn't have an answer. And it was kind of put that to bed and just this is pre-internet, so what are you going to do? Went to college, studied engineering, but was still interested in this question. So wandered myself over to the economics department and found a couple of people, just whether they were particularly high up or low down in the spectrum of teachers, I don't know. But I asked them the exact same question, didn't get a good answer. And this question was just in the back of my mind. And didn't get a good answer. And then the internet came along. And I remember, I don't even know how or why, where I was looking, but I just found a lecture by a gentleman called G. Edward Griffin, and he authored a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And it's the entire book about the creation of the Federal Reserve, the history of the Federal Reserve, and exactly answers the question, how does money enter the system? And so this weird curiosity that I had as a teenager starts to get answered. But from there, I get introduced to the concept of money supply. G. Edward Griffin, he would be what's called a libertarian. And so he was down that, again, none of these words mean anything to me at the time, but he's what would be called an Austrian economist, more so than a Keynesian economist, which is what we're mostly familiar with. Mm-hmm. And so this is just my introduction. I didn't go to formal schooling, so I didn't get Keynesianism ran down my throat. I got a little bit in high school, and that was it. But now I'm in this world where I'm starting to hear these people. I'm starting to get information from Austrians first up, and then I'm hearing this information. It makes an enormous amount of sense to me. And then I'm hearing the stuff on the news, and it all makes no sense to me. It's completely confusing. And all the recommendations they're giving me makes no sense and seems counterintuitive. Whereas when I learned Austrian economics, I'm just like, that makes perfect sense. And so that's how I got into the world of economics. And then a little bit of self-study, YouTube comes along, and all of a sudden there's so much information out there. I just get to consume a whole bunch of this information. I start to become self-taught economist. Start to hear people saying, Robert Kiyosaki, Peter Schiff. It's like they're on the precipice of a huge thing. And then the 2008 crisis hits. And I was like, it's interesting. The Austrians, the people I'm thinking about, they're the ones who are saying that there's a problem. You've got, the head of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, Keynesian, and he's in the middle of the recession. He's saying, nothing, no problems. All's good here. 12 months later, they admit that the recession started 3 months before Bernanke said that there was a problem. He said, no, all smooth sailing. So this is all confirmation for me that Austrianism is where it's at. And I've got a fair amount of knowledge now. This we're nearly a decade later, and time has gone on. And I realized, there's the biggest thing hurting society in the world, like everything. It plagues everything. It causes the wealth gap. It causes the income inequality gap. It causes the growth of government. It causes tyranny. I mean, it's just permeates everything. The cancer that is on this world is a corrupt money system. That's the conclusion I get to. And so now I'm like, okay, well, how do I get myself out of the system, And how do I get what do I advocate for? Who do I vote for? What steps do I take to try and make a better world so I can help the world in whatever way I can? And the solution to the corrupt money system at the time is gold. That's the best system. It's something I learned very, very quickly. I'm not the first person to think of this. Plenty of people have tried to figure this out, and they get punished viciously for it. To give you just a couple of highlighted examples, there are plenty of people who are like, okay, we need the population need to escape the fiat system, the US dollar system. We're never going to do it through Congress. Those guys are bought and paid for. There's trillions of dollars on the table. We're not going to get Congress to help us. It's not going to work. But how can we just, from a bottoms-up approach, grassroots, how can we do it? And people come up with things like Liberty Dollar. And there's another website called Gold Money. They tried to do it. And what they do is they say, hey, guys, buy gold, send it into us, store it in the vault, and you'll have an account with us. And, you'll have 700 grams of gold, and Bob will have 400 grams of gold. And if you owe Bob, $50, we can transfer that amount of gold to him. And it's all done with like an app or an account online or whatever else. And we can start to create an alternative money system. And so like I said, it's been tried a number of times before. I gave you a couple of examples. A little bit of research delves in. What happens is, under the guise of it's being used by criminals, it's being used to launder money, it's being used by terrorists, we have to shut it down for your protection. They send in men with guns, police, army, SWAT squad, you name it, they'll do it. They confiscate all of the gold. So all of the investors lost their money. And the guy who started the idea, trying to make the world a better place, he goes to jail. So, and this just happens over and over and over again. And so very clearly, I understand this is not going to work. They have their monopoly in this corrupt money system. All the politicians are bought and paid for. They own the media. They own all of the apparatuses. What J. Edward Griffin would call a power center in society. So it's everything from a news organization to Hollywood to protect their ability to print money out of thin air and have that ability. They have bought up the FBI and the CIA, and they bought up everything in order to protect it. Anything that could go after them is not there anymore to go after them. It's in their pocket. And so I go through a little bit of a depression at this point. This is like the world is corrupt and vicious, and I see it clearly for what it is, and there's just no way out. And so I can personally buy gold and buy silver and do some things so that my money's not getting depreciated, and gold runs up a lot in those years, and it's working kind of well for me. But then I just happen to be hanging out in those libertarian circles, hanging out in those Austrian economics circles. Someone brings to me the concept of this digital money, Bitcoin. And I, sadly, ego-driven, I'm like, really, digital money? All I know of digital is if it can be copied a million times. So, I have an MP3 song and all of a sudden it's copied a million times. So clearly this isn't going to work. But Big Brain Max, I'm feeling all egotistical over here. Tell me about your silly magic internet money, Bitcoin, so that I can tell you why it doesn't work. And basically, over the course of about a month, every single question I raise, my mentor in the world of Bitcoin, a gentleman by the name of Trace Mayer, he has an answer for me. And I just go deeper and deeper into this. And it turns out this, a character, Satoshi Nakamoto, has just found something absolutely incredible. He's managed to create gold, but in a defensible way. When the government says, okay, this is run by criminals. And by the way, it's Bitcoin was originally used by criminals. Like a big part of the user base early on, Silk Road, you probably heard about it, 2011, 12, 13. It was predominantly criminals. So this gives a lot of cover for the government to say, this Bitcoin thing is run by criminals. We've got to go after them. Now, they're going after them because they're competition to their money. But it is standard practice. That's not a great choice of words. It is very typical that it will be criminals because these are the people who are already outside of the system. So if you're a drug dealer or whatever it is, you can't enforce contracts. You can't have another contract with another drug dealer, and you can't go to the courts and say, hey, I want to sue this guy. He breached his contract. They have strict, that's the reason they have to have gangs to exist to basically enforce their own rules and protocols and all that kind of stuff, because they can't exist inside the system. So they're the first group of people to get something outside of the system and take on all of those risks. And they did that. and they grew Bitcoin to a sufficient space where they proved that it was defensible. No matter how much they wanted to come and get people, they couldn't get them. They couldn't go and round up every drug dealer. They managed to get a big name in the gentleman who had created Silk Road, managed to grab him eventually many years later, but it looked like he was going to be, for years, it looked like he was going to be available, like free, let's say. But that kind of process got us over the big hump, and it proved that it's defensible. So unlike the gold situation that I talked about before, the men with guns can't come and steal the gold and put the good guys in jail. Can't happen. And that was just a critically important hurdle and part of Bitcoin's journey. And so I'm sitting there watching it. I'm already a believer by this stage. I'm acquiring Bitcoin and starting to use it and starting to get my head around it, and I had all my questions answered. And that's where I pretty much become a disciple. It's proved itself as a chance. And that's really, I don't need to be proven to beyond a reasonable doubt that Bitcoin is going to become the reserve currency of the world at this point. Remember, I'm in a depression for all intents and purposes. I'm a pretty happy person, so my depression wasn't that deep. So I don't mean to make light of a serious word, because I know a lot of people suffer from depression. But you remember, the feeling is quite hopeless. They've got control of the CIA, the FBI, the media, the politicians. There is no solution to this corruption. We've got gold. Okay, great. It hasn't worked. We've tried it umpteen times. It does not work. Men with guns will come and steal all the gold. How can we have something that is defensible and exists in the cloud, that all of a sudden all the men with guns count for zero? And one person at a time, from the bottom up, we can just opt out of the system and get out of that corruption. And by the end of this process and all of this learning, I am now just a rabid disciple of Bitcoin, and start using my hobby was kind of like economics. My skill is as a teacher. And so people kind of gravitated towards me to explain Bitcoin, and all of the things that I had that Trace explained to me, I found that I could kind of explain them even better than he could explain them. And so I just became a little bit of a thought leader in the space. And 2012, back then, my YouTube channel blew up as crypto content, and I had the #1 best-selling book on Amazon back then in 2013 for Bitcoin. Now, of course, that means like a couple of hundred copies are sold because the space was so small. But even today, 10 years later, I hear a lot of people using the arguments that I crafted and wordsmith to help explain people to quickly and easily what kind of Bitcoin is. And so that's kind of the journey. And then the last kind of 10 years, I help out where I can, create educational content where I can on YouTube. People can check that out. I'm known as Contrarian Dude on YouTube. And so, yeah, that's kind of the journey to date.
Great, excellent. Definitely check his your YouTube channel out, the Contrarian Dude. It's got some great content, all the way from the early days. But yeah, in your opinion, I know that there's a lot of hype now and a lot of fear in the market, in the crypto market. There's a lot of guys now who are coming out of the woodwork saying, is this thing going down? Like, is it, basically, is the sort of hype over? And what would you say to that in your own opinion, where the market is right now, where it's going, and how you see regulation coming in being a hindrance or potentially, holding back some of the sort of the developments in crypto going forwad?
Sure. So let's take the first part of that question first. Personally, no harm, no foul in asking those kinds of questions. Is Bitcoin going to zero? Has it had its day in the sun? Could it crash? All of those questions are valid. I'm a skeptical mind myself, and I appreciate when skeptical minds come in and ask challenging questions. And so these are all great questions that need to be answered. So something that you have to answer for yourself. But I can share some of the thoughts that I had around that subject. So I've been around since 2012. I missed the first bubble and pop in 2011. I lived through 2013 bubble, 2 bubbles and pops. I lived through 2017 bubble and pop, living through this bubble and pop, 21, 22. And so I've been through a bunch of these. And I can tell you that time in the trenches counts. So back then it was way scarier. And now we're going through it for a 4th time. I have absolutely no fear whatsoever, and I sleep soundly, having a significant part of my personal wealth in Bitcoin. But I think it's overcome so many of the big challenges. And I guess for people who weren't around there, like it's understandable. Like when I got in 2012, the next thing I saw was like a big disastrous event. And I'm like, oh my God, the world's falling. This thing could be over. And then someone who was around in 2011 said, this is nothing. You should have seen what happened then. And it was way younger. It was way more fragile. It was way less proven back then. And, we say holding on for dear life is the deliberate mispronunciation of holding your Bitcoin. It's not for the faint of heart. And there's some scary times. And I would live through several 80+% drawdowns. But with each one, it strengthens your resolve, and you understand that this is growing. At the end of the day, it's growing. I don't think anybody has held Bitcoin for 4 years and lost money. You can hold it, and price goes down, and in the 6 months, 12 months, or occasionally it happens in the 24 months. It's only happened a few times, and I think once it happened after 36 months, where you could have bought at the exact wrong time, and if you sold 36 months later, you lost. But I think it's never happened. The price has always recovered after 4 years. And let me steel man the original argument here, which was, what if Bitcoin goes to zero? Bitcoin was kind of invented 2009. We don't really see it begin to take shape until kind of 2010, 2011. Remember, the last financial crisis, 2008, it wasn't around then, and Bitcoin just hasn't seen a long drawn out 2008 global financial crisis situation. When it does, is it going to have what it takes to get through it? It did get through March 2020 COVID lockdown, where everything kind of went down, went back up. It kind of got through it. But what about a bigger, deeper, longer recession? So, in that sense, Bitcoin is unproven. So I just wanted to kind of get that point out there to steel man the question. But having said all that, I know the space very well. I know the clientele very well. I know the different market actors. There are speculators here who don't know anything about anything, just trying to make money. There are people who treat it like a tech stock. They see the number of users grow on Facebook, and they see the number of users grow on the Bitcoin network, and they say, I'll just treat it like a tech stock and ride waves, and they buy and sell it for that. But there's a fairly large cohort of people like me who really, really, really understand the problems in society, the problem with the existing financial system, the corruption at the central banks all around the world, the poverty and misery and suffering that it causes for the average citizen. And for that same American spirit, for lack of a better word, but to be more general, to allow the world to participate, that freedom-loving spirit that are in the hearts of so many people, it's the only place to be sovereign. It's the only place to take the world in your own hands. It's the only place to have that feeling of independence. And so I know there's a very, very large cohort like me who the only reason we don't put every penny into Bitcoin is because we think the other people who might get scared over the next few months or years, so we can buy it up at a cheaper price. And that is a fairly large cohort of people. And so there are at some point, we're like, it's gone down enough. We could wait a little bit longer and maybe get it at an even lower price, but we just have to start scooping it up now while the price is low. And like I said, it's a fairly large cohort. And even on these drawdowns where they go down 50%, 60%, 80%, it's just us waiting, money sitting on the sideline. I myself, right now, I'm sitting on the sideline. I think we're going to go down a little bit lower. And I'm just waiting to jump in and scoop up at bargain prices. And that's my mentality. And so I know there's a fairly large cohort for that. So personally, I know that there'll always be a price for Bitcoin. And as long as there is a price, as long as it doesn't go to zero, some things that if there's a big bug in the system, if they do some kind of update, which Bitcoin is notoriously very, very slow at making updates because they test everything for years before they put it out. Other chains who are trying to catch up to Bitcoin, like the Ethereum of the world, no harm, no foul on them. I'm not a maxi, built Bitcoin maxi by a long stretch. But in order to try and catch up, in order to keep ahead of the competition, they're doing relatively risky things. And they can do things like there's hacks and there's people lose money, those kind of things. Bitcoin just has the opposite mentality. It is in the lead by so far, and it can be cautious and it can be deliberate. And the nature in which it was set up is it is very, very slow. So the likelihood of something like that happening, some cataclysmic event like that happening, which would break Bitcoin and send it to zero, I would argue is very, very small. And of all the cryptos, by orders of magnitude, smaller in the world of Bitcoin. And so for me, it's a very, very small risk, that risk of Bitcoin going to zero. And as long as it doesn't go to zero, then it's just proved itself over this decade plus time frame that it just gets bigger and stronger. And we can look at the numbers day by day, week by week, month by month, and see that it is attracting more and more people. And that's because every person who gets into it, one of the best things about Bitcoin is this cool technology that can be explained 50 different ways. As a savings vehicle, as a payment rail system, as a whole bunch of other things, right? And there's 50 different ways to reach out to the community and say, hey, come check out this cool new product. But for me, one of my favorite things about this is no matter why you come, you can become because you think it's a tech stock and you see the user base growing, so you want to buy it. You can come because you're a geek and you want to geek out at other cool technology that is blockchain. You can come because you're a drug dealer and you want to sell drugs online at Silk Road. You can come because you're a monetary theorist like me. Doesn't matter how you get here. Once you're in here, the community will educate you and teach you why this is so much more than any of those things. This is the solution for humanity to solve our biggest problems in the world. And so that just creates evangelist after evangelist after evangelist. And that kind of game theory mentality that's built into the system, because it is such an incredibly good solution to such a gigantically big problem that affects every single person, it just grows and grows and grows. And the number of diehards out there, like myself, just goes up and up over time.
Really does. It's an amazing effect that's happened. As soon as you get into crypto, you kind of find out what's wrong with the current system and why it was made, in a sense, and what it can bring to the table. So that happened to me, myself as well, working in investment banking. So it was like I didn't even know what it was, even in 2017 when we saw Bitcoin go up to 20,000 for the first time. I was just questioning what it was still, just like, what is this scam or whatever it is? And then, after a couple of years, you realize I sort of looked into it. I was questioning more and more how the system was. You get deeper and deeper into it. And then you start literally becoming, like you said, like an evangelist, where you're looking to spread and preach to others why it's the solution, and it's definitely at least a solution to what's currently happening out there, and especially now when we're looking at the most volatile, in my opinion, time in economics in the mainstream world. We're looking at hyperinflation events potentially happening closer to home. We're looking at, well, that's pretty much nearly already there. Other issues as well. So yeah, we have solutions here. We just need to use them and I guess spread the word as well. So I know there's a lot of guys in the freedom space in crypto who are into privacy coins. We've spoken to many guys on the privacy coin space. We know the people at Monero and Pirate Chain. I wanted to obviously know what your opinion on these coins are, because you cover them a little bit less, obviously, than some others in the freedom movement, let's say, who maybe pry towards those coins. What is your opinion on those coins compared to a Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think they're really interesting. I think there's a case for both. I think that I'm definitely not anti-privacy coin for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think maybe it's just their time will come a little bit later. I think Bitcoin needs to do a bit more of its job and a bit more of its heavy lifting first. But then as we get closer and closer to a Bitcoin standard, the jump from, if Bitcoin is a serious problem, if the government start using blockchain and the Bitcoin chain to start finding people, harassing people, whatever, the jump from all of the old systems to Bitcoin was so much of a bigger jump than from Bitcoin to another privacy coin or to a privacy coin. The speed with which the community, if they come after Bitcoin and try and shut it down in any way, and start harassing individuals. I can see that you spent $3 on Silk Road, or you're a trucker protester, like in Canada did. And so, we're going to go and get your Bitcoin. Now, if you hold it at exchanges or whatever, it's kind of like that's tough on you. But if you're holding your own private keys and they're doing forensic research and then sticking the FBI onto you and like destroying your life because of some stuff, you will need like half a dozen of those stories. And then all of a sudden, there'll just be this, one of two things will happen. The Bitcoin community will change its protocol to introduce more privacy, or people will jump ship and move to a privacy coin. I'm not sure which one of those two is the more likely. I suspect the former is more likely. I suspect the Bitcoin code will change if this becomes that big of a problem. And that will be something interesting to watch play out over time. But before we get there, I just don't think we're there quite now. But we can get there at any time. But I think it could be that we're a decade away from that. And during this time, Bitcoin's going to explode and other things are not. Because right now, I don't think there's a great thirst for privacy in the Bitcoin world. And if once that thirst comes, it'll be interesting to see how we react. Either Bitcoin will adapt or we'll move to privacy coins. But to give you an example of the kinds of people who don't care about the privacy aspect right now, the biggest holder, for example, Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy, he actually wants everyone to know how Bitcoin is. He tweets about it every other minute so that you can see the reserves. And he wants proof of ownership. He wants you to look at his wallet, stare at his wallet, and know that he has all this Bitcoin. That strengthens his balance sheet and things like that to have proof of funds. So that's an example of someone where they specifically do not want privacy. They would see privacy coming to the Bitcoin chain as a disadvantage. So it's only once I think Bitcoin grows to be a bigger and bigger animal than it is, then maybe they start to come after it in different ways, but it would be a foolhardy endeavor if they tried it, so they may not. But if they did try it, it's a very small leap, a much, much smaller leap than going from fiat and teaching people that magic internet money is the way you're going to be. That's a huge leap to get to Bitcoin. Once you're in Bitcoin, say, hey guys, a problem with the system in some way, shape, or form, you may get better security, better thing if you either vote for this change on the Bitcoin protocol or move to this privacy coin. That is a very, very small leap, and people will do that one very, very quickly. And so harassing Bitcoin is going to do very, very little. And so that's kind of my thoughts on privacy coins. I think they're a good concept, and I love to see they're called altcoins, so or Monero and Pirate Coin, all those kind of things. I love to see them out there experimenting, testing things, doing things, trying to break things. And that way, if Bitcoin ever wants to adopt some of those things to get more privacy, they have that option up their sleeve. Or maybe the Bitcoin community is too slow to adapt. And then you'll have Monero or private or any one of these privacy coins overtake Bitcoin. That's absolutely a possibility. I don't think it's true, but it's a possibility. Another point that should be added in terms of investment and things like that, in order for privacy coins to be a better investment than Bitcoin, it does not necessitate that the privacy coins grow to have a bigger market cap than Bitcoin. If you're starting at a much lower base, your percentage increase is what makes you the money. It's not whether or not it's a bigger chain than Bitcoin or not. So I'm not saying that it could be that privacy coins cannot overtake Bitcoin, not even come close to it, and still be a better investment than Bitcoin. So that's something worthy of noting. So there's a few different ways to look at it. I'm not sure if you want to do the philosophical approach, the principled approach, or the investment approach, but there's a few different ways to look at it, and those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I think it's true, actually, that it seems like I don't see, by the looks of things right now, governments aren't too, let's say, up to speed with how even crypto works properly at this moment in time. However, I know blockchain analysis and all this stuff is definitely getting larger and larger and more sophisticated. So I think that's where maybe at some point, yes, they could start harassing people for, their transactions because it is transparent. But there's definitely a use case for transparent blockchains, in my opinion, for sure. A lot of sure. I don't advocate just using private blockchains. There's certainly use cases for transparent blockchains, especially in whether you believe in a government system in itself. But if we had a transparent blockchain which was viewable by all public individuals on potential tax expenditure, for example, or where our money actually even goes, whether you believe in tax or not, let's say, at least we would know exactly where everything's going, rather than right now we don't really know where any of our money is really going to in regards to tax expenditure, let's be honest. So there are certainly, and that's only one use case really, there's so many. But yeah, I agree. I think they could definitely coexist. I think there's use cases on an investment side as well, for sure. Bitcoin is a stable the sort of granddaddy of crypto, and institutions are definitely buying it up first. So I think having wealth in there is certainly a lot of people say it's too expensive now and, it's too late, but we're looking to preserve our wealth as well. In a world where, inflation is eating up all your traditional fiat money, certainly having it in Bitcoin is certainly much better than that as an option. Thanks for that. And I guess, what is your thoughts on the future of mainstream economics? Because I know there's going to be massive changes. We're looking at potential CBDCs, which was a conspiracy theory a few years ago. Now it's openly being talked about in regards to potential digital dollar, digital euros, all these types of currencies. How do you see this playing out, in your opinion, where, we could potentially have CBDCs and crypto almost at the same time? Or do you see government trying to outlaw crypto or just overregulate it to bring in CBDCs? How do you see it all working out in that sense?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, you asked about regulation earlier, the part 2 to a question. I forgot to circle back to it, so I can do that now. CBDCs are coming for sure. You say, it used to be a conspiracy theory. Are there any conspiracy theories left? I mean, I used to believe in all of them. Now they're all. I'm trying to come up with one. They've all been proven true at this point.
Yeah.
CBDCs are coming for sure, and that's just common sense. It's just I'm not a fan of central bank currencies, but if you're going to have one, it's more efficient and better to have these digital ones than running around in armored trucks and running to ATMs and all this kind of nonsense. So of course that's coming. That's just common sense. So we're going to have them. Are they going to have nefarious things built in, extra tracking, all those kind of things? I mean, absolutely. Why not? They're going to build it. So why wouldn't they build it to have their dream spy state? I'm sure they were going to have all of those things. I do think they'll what's the word? They will be side by side for some time, until eventually I think Bitcoin kills them, or just no one wants the fiat currency. But those things will be there, and they will be around for a long time, and they'll live side by side. And personally, I think it's a good thing. I think it speeds up the adoption of Bitcoin as people get used to the digital money. Once they're used to digital money, once again, it's now a very small leap to move over to Bitcoin, because they're used to the concept. They're used to an online wallet. They're used to it. And so that's a very important thing. I know people say, foreign currencies now have these, elaborate counterfeiting measures. The notes are different sizes, different colors. It also helps for, for blind people. They can feel what note it is depending on the size of it and the texture and all these different things built in for advanced features. You'll notice that the US dollars and the greenbacks have stayed the same largely over the decades. They don't have any of these cool features. And if you want to know the reason why, and it's because it is basically because there's a chance that it could hurt the people's faith in dollars. It's just a straight up marketing principle. So in order to keep people's faith in the US dollars, they keep these notes with a very old technology. They don't put any of the new technology into the US paper currency anymore. And so there's a little bit of a catch-22 for them. They're going to have to move to this digital currency. Is that going to boost or lower, the normies' faith in the US dollar? Well, I would argue it's going to lower their faith in the US dollar. That's what I would suggest. And all of a sudden, that has a cost to them as well. That drives even more people to Bitcoin. So a lot of these things about the CBDCs, I think, are going to be very, very good for Bitcoin. They are going to exist in tandem for quite a while, I would suggest. And that's okay. I'm perfectly okay with that. So bring it on. Help speed on the adoption of Bitcoin by bringing on CBDCs. We talked about regulation a little bit. I can jump track to go over there. I think a few questions ago, you asked the question, I forgot to answer it, which was one of the big things that kind of need to happen and what's going on in that world of regulation. So I think one of the biggest things holding back the big institutional money coming into that is a rule, a silly guideline by the IRS, which is how you have to define this and how you have to mark it on your balance sheet. And basically, you can buy, let's say, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then buy the laws for all these Fortune 500 companies and all of the laws, the SECs, and somewhere in that rigmarole of law, the word escapes me, somewhere in that rigmarole of all that law, the way the CFOs have to mark that on their sheet is they have to mark it, the value of their coins or their Bitcoin, they have to mark it as the lowest value it ever was. So if you go and buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin and the price goes down. You watch it go through a 50% drawdown. So now you're only sitting on $500 million worth of Bitcoin. And then the price skyrockets, right? 20x. And so now you're sitting on $10 billion of Bitcoin. When you report that to your shareholders and things on your balance sheet, you have to report it at the lowest price it was in its entire life while you held it, which is you've got $10 billion worth of Bitcoin, but you have to report to your shareholders that you have $500 million worth of Bitcoin. And so this is really, really hurting people. You've got companies, when they hold their cash, they just report it as its actual value. And so you've got Apple sitting, I think, on $200 billion cash plus. They're watching it melt like an ice cube through inflation. But at least they have a pristine balance sheet. So when they go to borrow money, they get it at they get the rates at really good rates because their balance sheet is pristine. If they look to convert that to Bitcoin, now all of a sudden the way they have to report that is on their balance sheet the lowest price that it ever was at any time during the time they held it. And it really hurts their balance sheet. It changes how much they can borrow money from in the future and things like that. So that is a really, really big flaw in the system there that just means people cannot hold the Bitcoin in a good and easy way. And so the big institutional money, the corporations, that's really holding them back. So that's probably, I would say, number one thing to fix. If we're going to put pressure on the government to try and fix things, that would be number one. Number two is you really got to help the SEC approve an ETF, a spot ETF. So at the present, there's a futures-based ETF, which I was extremely skeptical of at the time and still am, and I still think there's a lot of question marks over it. So a little bit of history. The gold and silver prices have been, in my opinion, manipulated for a very long time on the futures market. So the futures market, the gold and silver is bought and sold in huge quantities, way more than even exists every single day. And so if there's a lot of people wanting exposure to the gold price, I think they're printing too much money. I want to hedge against inflation. I'm going to go and buy $500,000 worth of gold or silver. People don't actually get to buy gold and silver because it's expensive to transport, it's expensive to secure. You got to hire security guards to stare at it and not to get it stolen or pay some other company to do it. And so what they do is they trade on the futures market. They buy and sell gold there. Well, the problem is on the futures market, because you're not taking possession of the gold or silver, what they can do is if there's a huge demand for gold, there can just be some banks or some cronies on the other side saying, I'll sell you gold and I'll eat the price. If the price goes up, I'll eat it. And so you'll get your profit, but you never had to actually take the gold. And so what they can do is they can sell an infinite amount of paper gold to stop the buying pressure of gold going up. Right? Lots of buyers come in, the price should go up with a limited supply. The problem is they can sell paper gold, like just pallets and pallets and pallets of paper saying that, we're the other side of this bet. And if the price of gold goes up, no worries, we'll lose a bit of money, we'll pay it. We're making way more money over here with the fiat money system, so we can afford these losses just to keep the system alive. And gold, the gold price can't go up, the silver price can't go up. And gold is typically the canary in the coal mine that lets you know inflation is out of control, people do not trust the central banks, and you need to get out of fiat money and into gold. And so a lot of people want to get into gold. They get into gold, but the price doesn't go up because they just bought paper. Just paper was sold, paper gold was sold, and that's it. And so they can control the gold market and have done for many decades on the futures market. So what did the SEC do? We had the world begging for a spot price Bitcoin ETF, meaning you buy money into the ETF goes and buys the Bitcoin, and at the end of it, if you want to redeem it, you can say, send me the Bitcoin. Don't just send me the cash payment, send me the Bitcoin. And it actually takes supply out of the market. They said, no, we're not going to approve that kind of ETF. We're going to approve a futures-based ETF. ... It means it's paper contracts going back and forth, which, same problem. Institutions may think, man, inflation's a problem. I want to scoop up Bitcoin. Huge demand coming in. They want the price should go up, but the futures market is just selling paper on the other side and not giving them the real Bitcoin because the futures market is not redeemable in actual Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. You can't say, give me the Bitcoin at the end. You just say, give me the dollar's value of my profit at the end. And so I was extremely skeptical of it. I remain extremely skeptical of it. I don't think they're going to release a Bitcoin spot price ETF particularly soon, exactly because of this. We need to put a lot of pressure on them to do that. Fortunately, several other countries around the world have done that, and that's a really good thing. Australia has it. I think Brazil has it. Canada has it. I think some countries in Europe have it. So there are spot ETFs there. And so that's all kind of really, really interesting and productive. And one more final thought on all of this kind of topic is I was talking about game theory a little bit. We now have two countries, very, very small token countries. One I never even heard of, but it was the Central Republic of Congo or Central Republic of Africa. I forget.
Yeah, Central African Republic. Yeah.
Thank you very much. National GDP, I believe, $2 billion. We've got El Salvador. That was the other one, was the first one. I think GDP, $10 billion. These are two, but this is game theory. This is how it starts. And one by one, you're just going to see more and more sovereign states, more and more companies, more and more individuals come on because, the reason they came on is because of game theory. They saw people like me buying in 2012 and seeing the price go up 10,000%. And they want, this is worth putting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of my portfolio into that. Let's give me some of that. And that's how it grows. So I'm really excited by that game theory playing out. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to be for you. The earlier you get in, the better it's going to be for you. And it's true for individuals, states, companies, etc. And right now we're just watching that game theory play out over many years.
Yeah. And it's really interesting about obviously Central African Republic and El Salvador, obviously. I think that we can see more and more nations will adopt Bitcoin. Let's see how the world takes it. It obviously needs to have more. We need to inform more people and definitely spread the sort of education to more and more people to adopt it for themselves as well, and to really know the reason why. Because there's still a lot of people out there who are buying it. I don't know, Shiba Inu to make some money because they thought that it will do what Dogecoin did. These sort of things we need to sort of try and just to educate a little bit. Obviously, that there's nothing wrong with someone trying to make some money, but knowing the reasons why it can really, really change the world, and that sort of message needs to be spread, and that's what we're doing here. So I guess let's move on slightly to your work. So the Success Council, just wanted to, I guess, touch upon what you're doing there and what it aims to do, and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so the Success Council was founded in 2012, and it's basically designed to teach people how to protect and grow their wealth during very, very uncertain times. And basically during the times of an out-of-control central bank. And all over the world, the central banks are out of control and printing. And so all this inflation that we're seeing in America, it's quite bad. In the rest of the world, it's even worse for the most part. All this stuff was very, very predictable. And it's not because of greedy corporations. Corporations didn't get greedy in 2022. They were always greedy, so it's not that. It's very obvious what it is because it was easily predicted by the Austrian economists, it was the money printing. The governments, the central banks just printed money. When that money enters into the economy, it causes inflation. And so what does that do? It causes this massive roller coaster ride of this huge spike up in prices in assets. And then there's these big crashes, and then there's back and forth. And so the Success Council was built to basically teach people exactly what is happening, what is going to happen, and then to help them understand how the financial system works. So all of a sudden they can see it's like, oh, this is what's going to happen. That asset class is going to go up. That asset class is going to fall down. And so it's really a way to just kind of protect your wealth as a bare minimum and grow your wealth. And what we've been able to be very good at Success Council is jumping from asset class to asset class at the right time. And I just call this basically swimming with the current as an investor. So, you don't want to, if you're a fantastic real estate broker or builder or whatever, you can make money in any market. But you need to be really on the top of your game to make money in a down market. And that's true for stock trading. And it's true for everything. You can make money in any market everywhere. But I just figured out early, it was better to take a step back, not be the world's greatest real estate guy, not be the world's greatest crypto guy, not be the world's greatest stock market guy, but take a step back, understand the macroeconomic situation and understand which asset class was going to go up and which asset class was going to go down. And that way I could avoid those big pitfalls when the market crashes. And I don't need to be a particularly great trader at anything. Just by knowing which way the current's going, I can always know and swim with the current. That way I don't have to be the strongest swimmer to make a lot of money. And that's just by having one skill in macroeconomics. That's really helped me become very, very wealthy. And so I just wanted to share that knowledge and give people my framework. And so we teach people that with a newsletter, and we teach people that with my YouTube channel. And so if people want to learn from that, they're more than welcome to follow me on YouTube and kind of go from there.
Excellent. Yeah. So we'll have all the links to the Success Council in our show notes as well for everyone to check out. How are you, I guess, personally preparing for, I guess, the coming decade? Obviously, there's a lot of volatility, the potential great reset of what seems to be in the plans. So I guess just what your personal preparations are, if any, currently in regards to that. I mean, are you preparing geographically, potentially just moving your wealth out of the system, just little sort of, I guess, strategies that you're currently putting in place, if any, again, like I said, in regards to this?
Sure. You mentioned a couple of key ones there, but a big one, I absolutely believe that there's no price where, like, sometimes I believe we're at an absolute peak. It's at the top of the market. Bitcoin's going to crash and go down for a couple of years. If you don't have any Bitcoin, I still buy some Bitcoin today. You'll probably lose some money, but buy it. And the reason is things can turn on a dime. And there can be food shortages, there can be government crackdowns, there can be whatever. And even if your country seems like a really stable first world country, economic crisis can cause crazy things very quickly, and desperate governments do desperate things. You see it in other places all the time. Like if people like in Venezuela, people in Zimbabwe, people in Turkey, people in Ukraine, when the Russians march across the border, everyone left everything. All their money in their bank accounts gone, their home gone, their car, their assets gone. If they had gold and silver, they could take what they could carry and no more. That's it. It's gone. The one thing they could take was a thumb drive or a phrase in their head, and they could have had any amount of wealth, Bitcoin with them, and it's going to work anywhere in the world. Within like an hour, they can use that Bitcoin to go back into cash and be buying food. So for absolutely everybody, it is an essential part of being a nimble person and can deal with any crisis. You have to have some cryptocurrency. That's just an absolute must. And so on that front. Next, what personal things? So actually, I'll touch on travel first. Just being someone who's capable of change is a powerful thing. And I spent my 20s basically traveling all over the world. I have children now, a little less mobile. I haven't traveled for a few years, but I have all those skills. And if I needed to pick my family up, take millions of dollars worth of my wealth, we could relocate in a day, and we would be very, very fine. And so we're very, very nimble. And that's something I worked on for decades with this in mind. And I'm very, very comfortable with my level of nimbleness in this way. And so I highly recommend people do that. Now, having said that, I also believe there has to be somewhere better to go to. And so I'm nimble in case of that kind of an emergency, but I also choose to position myself in a place where I think is great. I choose to position myself, and I have a lot of, it's a good place to stay for me. I have backup food at home. I just spend a grand or two and have, there's lots of companies out there who do long-term food storage, just like freeze-dried stuff. You buy it, spend a grand or two, sits in a cupboard there for 20 years. And if there's ever a food shortage, you and your family can eat for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, however much it is you buy. Know in those situations that, things can get hairy and gangs can roam around looking for, because they didn't prepare, so they want to go and look for the easy targets and steal things. So, make sure that, as long as within the law, you are armed. So have your guns, have your bullets, have all that kind of thing. So all these kind of things just play into a preparedness mindset. And I've kind of done all of those things. Honestly, I did them all like 15 years ago. And so I don't think about them that much anymore. I know I'm in a very defendable position. I know that I'm nimble if I need to leave. I'm strong if I need to stay. And I don't really spend too much time thinking about it. I spend a year or two kind of learning about things and implementing some of the strategies. And then I just put it away and I have peace of mind. I don't think about it. So that's kind of where I am with all of those things.
Yeah, not being in fear of what could happen is another one. Just that self-work still is one of those key things of not being in fear. Yeah, prepare, but never be in the fear zone, because that can really paralyze you and probably make the wrong decisions. Yeah, no, thanks very much. It's critically
important. So, and a little bit to help with that, it's just a thought that kind of helped me with that kind of same concept. Humanity is going to go on, right? No matter what, no matter how disastrous it is, humanity is going to go on. And the worst, most doomsday crazy situation ever is like half the population is perished somehow, starved to death or whatever. Well, in order for you to be a survivor in that situation and to come out and thrive, you need to be in the top 50% of human beings on the planet in terms of preparedness, resources, skills, mental health, physical health, etc. So most people in the first world can do that very, very quickly and easily. And so it's a really soothing, calm thought. So like once you get down this rabbit hole and you start thinking of all the threats, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, put yourself in a depression, put yourself in a tough place. And so just remember that, you live in the first world, you're doing just fine, and things are going to be okay. Let's just take the simple steps to make things a little better.
That's right. So yeah, that's why we're here is to make the world a better place. That's why the podcast was started. I'm sure that's why Success Council was started, is to help people just prepare for these types of moments and save their wealth, basically. Excellent. Well, thanks, Max, for joining me today, and I look forward to having you on in the future. Potentially some new projects, even on our side or on your side, to discuss. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Plus, obviously, if you're interested in checking out all of Max's stuff on the Success Council, we will have the links here in the show notes. So definitely check that out. So excellent. Peace and love to you all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.